Hello and welcome everybody to the 2021 Connections Conference. My name is Laura Poinkowski and I'm the Office of Individual and Family Affairs Administrator, and I am excited to introduce our first session. At this time, I want to turn it over to Mercy Care's Chief Executive Officer, Lori Botchell. Lori has been a leader in Arizona's healthcare community for more than 25 years. As Mercy Care's Chief Executive Officer, she is responsible for all operational and financial results. In 2019, Lori was recognized by the Arizona Capital Times through the Women Achievers of Arizona Award. Lori was also named one of Arizona's most influential women in business by the Phoenix Business Journal in 2017. And without further ado, Lori.
Great, thanks, Laura. This is Lori Bottrell, as she said, and really happy to be here today and really want to welcome each of you and thank you for taking time to come to our Connections Conference. So the purpose of this today will be to connect with members and families, and even though it's virtual, we're really happy to have a full week of sessions planned in both the morning and the afternoon each day. And I really want to thank Laura and the whole Mercy Care team for kind of adjusting to this virtual world, but really moving forward to really make sure the conference is, just something that really has an impact on each of your lives. The sessions will include stories of recovery, nutrition tips, telemedicine, employment pointers, information on opioid use and brain injury, best practices for deaf and hard of hearing, and art journaling. And this really aligns with Mercy Care's mission, vision, and values, as well as the values of the OIFA team to empower members and families through education and engagement. And now I'd like to turn it over to Christopher Michael Copolillo, who is a clinical coordinator at Community Bridges Forensic Assertive Community Treatment Team, so our FACT team. He previously served as case manager at CBI ACT team and a clinical coordinator at Mesa Heritage Clinic. And now I'm going to turn it over to him to share just this inspiring story of recovery. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Lori. And everybody, welcome to the 2021 Connections Conference. My name is Christopher Michael, and I am a clinical coordinator for Community Bridges FACT 2. I wanted to share a little bit, to try and get another story out there of recovery in action and like what it's looked like for me from my perspective. I was born in Oxnard, California, in Ventura County. I grew up with two good parents, a sister, and at 9 years old, my dad had transferred jobs out to Arizona, where we moved later on. A couple of years after being there, my grandma had been into a car accident, and she was killed by a semi truck. From that point, my sister and I went to go and we went to go stay with my other grandparents on my dad's side for a few days while my parents went to go and manage the funeral and all the stuff that goes along with death, all the property and all that stuff. So my Nana and Papa and I and my sister got to be pretty close during that time. And 6 months later, my papa ends up contracting valley fever, which turns into meningitis, and then I get more familiar with emergency departments or emergency rooms and the terms ICU. And so that part was also not fun. And he ended up passing away shortly after. I remember going to the hospital just before he died and touching his hand and telling him, "Papa, I love you." And he tried to mouth it too, or squeezing his hand or whatever it was. But he ended up passing away. Another 6 months after that, my Nana calls and she's incoherent on the phone. And she calls the house and she still believes that she lives in Chicago, Illinois. And she had had a stroke. So shortly after, she moves to Minnesota, where she ends up passing away too. So those were my big traumatic events from childhood or whatever. And from there, what I learned from that was that as soon as I start getting close to people, or as I open up to people, people die. There's another incident around that time. My family and I were on vacation, and we were in South Dakota, and a deer runs out across the freeway and ends up getting hit and split in two in a vehicle that was just a couple of vehicles ahead of us. That brought me to the realization that life can end very, very quickly. And I can recall during that time having some nights, well, probably most of the nights, where I would spin around in my head for a while. And that actually looked like me running around in circles, physically, trying to process infinity and what happens after you die and all of those fun things. So from there, 13, I end up getting pulled from school because my grades start suffering really bad, and I'm home taught for the next year and a half. It has its good and its bad that comes along with it. I won't say anything either way, but for me, it was probably better that I was in school, because during that time, kids are learning how to talk to each other, how to like play those, the social things that they do. And I did not get those lessons during that time. So 16 comes along, and I'm with a group of my friends, and one of my friends has some weed. And we're sitting around passing the pipe around, and the pipe comes to me, and I don't want to smoke. My parents had talked to me every time that those commercials would come on TV with the girl and the egg and the frying pan, right? And she would hold up the frying pan and she'd say, like, this is your brain on drugs, and then drugs will destroy they'll destroy your family and they'll destroy your relationships and blah, 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 blah. And she'd go around just like banging the heck out of everything in the kitchen until finally she says, like, drugs will destroy your dreams. So as soon as those commercials are done, my dad would look back over at my sister and I, and he would say, drugs are bad, don't do them. So the pipe comes over to me, and I know that drugs are bad and I'm not going to do drugs, right? And I know that weed's a drug. So, this pipe comes to me and I say, oh, no, thanks, I'm good, and, I'm with a group of my peers. Like, for me, like, I guess you could say that it was a peer pressure start for me. What I realized then after I had taken my first hit of weed was that I felt different than I had ever felt in my life. And there was a chemical that was introduced to my body that makes me feel different in my head, that I no longer think and feel the same things that I had been feeling for the years before that. So bonus that I get like a change of mind, right? And for me, it became an obsession. And that's what I connotate it to is an obsession, like something that happens in my mind that triggers me, that like all of a sudden, like I can't stop thinking about this thing no matter what. I try to get my mind off of it. I try to do other things. It just fills up the entirety of it, and it's like this love, only it's not necessarily love, because like I know that like other things around me are getting destroyed, right? But at that time, I was not very good at lying. I told my parents what I had done, and they got me into a substance abuse program, right? Because like now I'm a few uses in, like all of a sudden I've got a problem, right? And so I get to my first treatment setting, but already like I can't stop getting high, and so I end up getting kicked out of a substance abuse program because I can't stop using substances. I thought that was a very strange reason to get kicked out of a substance abuse treatment, but that it is what it is. So I went to one of them. I ended up getting kicked out of that one. I went to another one and I dropped out of that program, and then 17 and 18 rolls around, and we're drinking a lot more, taking whatever pills that we can find. And then a buddy of mine sells cocaine. And so I start using Coke, and Coke's a fun drug. The first time that I was doing it, I remember that I also felt different with every substance that I used. Like it was either better or more out there. And those things, that was what I wanted, was to get away from my mind. And so like I managed to continue to do that. At 19, I went to my first rehab inpatient in California on a ranch, and they talked to me about one of those 12-step programs, and they had talked to me about like that first step, and the powerlessness and what that looks like. And I thought, maybe not so much. They also tried to teach me like more about following specific guidelines for living. That I wasn't necessarily able to follow at that time. So by the time that I got out of that rehab, another buddy of mine had invited me to a party, and everybody's drinking and they're smoking weed out on the patio. And I say, yo, like, toss me a beer. And my friend says, dude, you just got out of rehab. Do you really think that's a good idea? And I said, dude, I went in for methamphetamine. Like, I didn't go in for alcohol. I didn't go in for pot. I went in for I went in for meth. And he's like, all right, like, and maybe he knew more than I did at the time, because a couple days later, like, I'm back on the meth pipe again too, and it's a couple years later of like continuing down with that, and I'm back in my next rehab, but this time it's for heroin, and needles, and by that time I had gotten to a methadone clinic that I was taking methadone, and by the time that I got inpatient at the rehab, I was just cold kicking from the methadone when I got there. 2 weeks into that program, somebody had smuggled in some heroin, and I remember smoking in the bathroom with a few people, and 5 out of the 6 of us ended up getting kicked out. I'm the lucky one that got to remain, right? And so from there, I thought that I had done so much hard work for that 2 weeks that I was sober in rehab, that I was able to talk to my parents and convince them of what a good job that I had done while I was in rehab, and how I just needed to have a vacation. So I thought that I'd go to California, and I had this idea in my head that I was going to go relax on the beach, and like my life was going to be different. And as soon as I get back from California, I'll find a job, I'll start working, I'll build up this empire for myself. And none of those things happened. My parents also funded this trip too, and with that money before I went, I ended up calling the dude. And I get out to Maricopa County, he doesn't answer, and I think, oh my goodness, this is a sign, like I'm not supposed to be using, thank goodness. I get out to the city of Maricopa, and the guy calls and he says, meet me at Mesa Drive and Broadway. In no time, I'm back over there, and the dope's gone by the time I hit the California border. So now all of a sudden, like, I'm back in this crisis mode in my mind, and I don't know what else to do, but I remember the word Alano, right? And I wasn't exactly sure what it meant, but it was short for Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, And I get to California and I look up San Diego Alano, and I end up going to this group. I end up going to this this meeting hall where I meet a few people that are in a sober living there, and excuse me. And they, and they take me out with them to their convention that they were having that night. And so I get to go out with them, and one of these guys invites me to dinner with him and his group of sober people that are there. And I tell him, like, hey man, like, I don't have any money, and he says, this is where I really learned like what altruism means, and like what altruism in practice is. And the guy says, somebody else had done something like this for me. I'm passing this on to you. And the only thing that I expect is not ever to see this money again, but for you to do the same in return for somebody else. And I said, okay, and so he ended up buying me dinner that night. And like, it's California, San Diego, like it was not a cheap dinner, from there, the party doesn't stop for me. I end up coming back. I end up getting right back into my same routine of things that I do. It's wake up, find a way to be able to steal things from people, and then go back out to live my life again. My parents didn't necessarily want me around so much anymore. I did the East Valley tour of halfway houses, and then I did the West Valley tour of the halfway houses. And finally, I end up over at a friend's house for a while. And I wake up one morning, and I still have this iPad that my parents had gotten me for the Christmas before, for me to be able to use, to find resources, to be able to apply for jobs and like find different ways to like communicate and do stuff in the world. But for me, I decided that I was going to pawn it that day, and so I did. And then I headed out to 23rd Avenue in Bethany Home, where the dude told me to meet him. I was in a McDonald's parking lot that's over there. Like, yay, every time I go by that McDonald's, I'm still very thankful for how my life changed there. I get to the parking lot, and I'm sitting there, and the guy says that it's going to be 20 minutes. It ends up taking 2 hours, and the guy finally shows up, and I get a half gram of cocaine and a gram of heroin, and other way around, sorry. But I end up like going back to my truck, and I'm sitting there, and I start cooking up this shot, and like this lady in a white minivan pulls up next to me, And she's got her two little kids, and like they go in and they're like doing their deal, you know, and then they come out and like all the little kids like have their little bags of treats or whatever, you know, and like I just think of this lady and like how she's going to go and live this normal day, you know, and she's gonna go take her kids home or go do something, and like me, I'm sitting here with a spoon between my legs, wearing basketball shorts that have burn marks on the insides of them that are, you know, rubbing up and down against my dope sick legs, you know, and I just keep thinking like something has to change, and it's got to change right now. So I, you know, I'm going to go cook the shop because like, you know, my mind's still in this thing, right? You know, and I go and I take this hit, and then I think, you know, like something needs to change today. And so I start thinking about like the different ways that I can kill myself, and you know, I won't go into terribly much detail than that, but what I can say is that like there was inspiration that came to me in that moment from someone who I had met previously in this journey of recovery. And at that point he had 12 years of sobriety, and when I had first met him, he had 2. So I knew that for one person at least something worked, and I knew that it was possible. I didn't know that it was possible for me, but I figured that I'd throw everything that I could into it and try one last time. And if it didn't work, I can kill myself tomorrow. So with that in mind, I went to my parents' house and I knocked on the door and I said, "Mom, I have to get clean." And they, you know, they didn't really like answering the door for me, and they've heard this 1,000 times before. And, you know, my mom says, "Okay, go to Community Bridges." And I said, "Yeah, okay." So I go to Community Bridges, and I stay there, and I still have dope left, and I turn it into to this techs or the staff or whoever's working there at the time, and they you know, they throw it away, and and I go there and I have a nice little nap because I'm still loaded, and in the morning time, this kindly peer support comes over to me and he says, "Hey," he says, "You know, you're not sick, like you're going to have to go, like your time's coming up here, and if you're going to get sick and come back." And I said, okay. And you know, they called my parents, and my parents were willing to accept me back for the night. And so I go there, and my mom, bless her, she you know, she stayed awake with me all night until I got sick, like through getting sick, through throwing up, through like all the, you know, the rancid stuff that comes along with being, you know, with being dope sick. And in the morning time, you know, we waited until I got sick and then some. And then I went to Community Bridges. Now, know that I had this high resolve that I was never going to use again, right? Like from that point, like I threw dope away, right? I got out of the situation. I was ready to not ever use substances again. And I get to Community Bridges, and I get through the intake process, and I go back to the smoking section. This is back when you could smoke at the sites. And this guy's sitting out there, and he looks over at me and he says, like, "Dude, you want to hit? Like, I got some dope." And I say, "No, dude, like, I'm not here for that. Like, I'm here to get sober, and I'm here to do something different." And he says, "Dude, whatever, your call." And I said, "Okay." And it's not very many hours later, and the nurse tells me that it's going to be an hour before I start getting Suboxone, you know, or Subutex or whatever it is that they give in detox at that time. And I say, okay. So, you know, the mind that I have told me that I needed to go find this dude again. So I did. And I asked him if he like had the supplies in order to be able to get loaded in the facility. He said yes. And so on June 1st of 2013, I took my last injection of heroin with toilet water at Community Bridges in the middle stall at the East Valley location. I share that because it's important to remember that no matter what the circumstances are, there's always a going up point from where you are. And like, this was by no means like one of the lowest places that I had been. You know, like I had been to places that were much worse. I had been through overdoses. I had woke up in the hospital with my parents saying, "Thank God you're alive," or like, you know, like, "How are we not going to do this again?" Or girlfriends or friends or whatever, you know, that like, you know, I created a lot of disappointment around me, I feel like, during those times. And like those felt a lot lower than the last time that I got loaded. But from there, like I was willing to do what I needed to do, you know? And so I took that last shot, I got loaded again. And at some course during there, that peer support who had told me that I had to go, like came back and talked to me again. And he talked to me about a program that he went to that was a long enough program that it taught him the skills in order to grow up and actually become an adult, you know? And I didn't know what that looked like. I know that for me, you know, I saw my parents as adults. I saw like some of my friends had adult tendencies or whatever, but like I wasn't there, and like I couldn't seem to like make anything work for me. But like, there I am crying in his office for a half hour, and then he's like, and then he says, he told me what he had done, and I figured maybe I should go and give that a shot. So I did, and I was willing to listen. And for me, when I started out at that place, I got transportation from there over to the facility, and like as soon as I get there, like the guy who's doing the front desk is somebody who I was in halfway house with a few months before that, and the guy who's doing intake is somebody who I was in rehab with a few years before that, and it just seemed to me like the path was laid out for me, like that this was the right place for me to be, and like everything that, all of those hard decisions, for like all of that pride and ego that I had prior to that, with giving consideration to what I was willing to do, all of that got pushed aside with, is it worth my life today? Right. And so let me give an example. Like, you would get you get disciplinary actions if your bed wasn't folded right, or if your clothes were not separated an appropriate amount of inches, or whatever the case may be, or if you didn't clean up or have your shirt tucked in, or whatever was the case, right? And so I guess other people refer to it as like, is this the hill that you want to die on? For me, it was do I want to like give up my life for this today? And I looked at that as like an opportunity and motivating factor, instead of like, these people are doing this thing to me. And from there, like my life changed, like the way that I did things changed, the way that I started to think about things changed. And I just followed the next step that was laid out in front of me. And years before that, like I tried doing one of these programs, one of these community-based programs, and we'd gone through some steps, and part of that process is being able to own up to the things that you've done, and like talk about like the person that you are and the things that you've done in your past. That first person that I had tried doing that with, I was not able to do. I remember walking out of his house knowing that I was going to get high again, because I just could not be honest. But then this next go around, I had made a resolve that no matter like what it was that I needed to share, that I needed to share it, and so I did. So 8 months later from the starting point at that place, I ended up leaving there and going to a 3-quarter house, where I started like, I just kept on with my recovery. But while I was still there at that place, I would come back to Community Bridges every day. And there's somebody who still works at the agency that would be there to receive my inquiries for employment. But I would show up there in a suit and tie every day for the first 30 days that I was able to look for a job, trying to go there and get employed at Community Bridges, because I wanted to be able to give back. It took a while after that, and then somewhere around 14 months of sobriety, I finally ended up having a way to be able to get into Community Bridges as a peer support. But it was very important for me to like be able to come back and do this work. And that has sprung from a peer support, working on one of the detox units, to being, a supervisor of one of the ACT teams now. I'm very grateful for everything that Community Bridges has done, Mercy Care, and all of the people who have like been there along the way throughout every step. So I got, I started working and learning and building skills, and working with SMI populations, and that has certainly been an eye opener, and really like shown me a lot more about like the depths at which like I can open my heart up to people, and that has been a very beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful for like all of the services that are currently available to our members and to people who genuinely need them. I don't know, like recovery's been very good to me. I got married to somebody who I met in one of those community-based recovery programs. I had a kid. When I got married, I inherited a kid, bought a house, have vehicles. I don't know, like it's a much different life than I thought I was going to get. Considering also at 18 years old, I wasn't sure I was going to make it to 18. The reason that it's important to share this stuff is because after we get through from one side to the other, where it at once seemed impossible to be able to ever cross that bridge, after crossing it, it's reaching a hand back out and saying, come on, we can do this together. And that's why I'm here today. And so I thank everybody for your time, for being here, and I appreciate all of you for what you do for the greater good. Thank you.
So at this point in the presentation, we have an opportunity for questions and answers. We have Christopher Michael here as a panelist, Emily Maury, and her question for you, Christopher, is what made you want to get help?
Yeah, hi Emily, thank you. I think some of that started out with losing the ease and ability to be able to manipulate the people around me, right? Like my circle got very small towards the end, and it was it was my parents who were like the last like hanger-ons from people that were around me, and they started setting up their own boundaries by doing their own working their own program or whatever you want to call it, and they started telling me like dude, like you can't be here, you got to go and like do something else somewhere else, so like this isn't the place for you anymore. And I stopped being able to like play the same games that I would play with people. I don't know, a lot of my a lot of the things that I had been able to do, I wasn't able to do anymore. And I mean, every day was tedious, and like towards that end, it was the realization of like what comes next, and when will tomorrow ever come, I guess. And I think that was it for me. And then realizing like it's been 10 years and tomorrow still hasn't come. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like we had one other thing that came into the questions and answers. So what things do you do to sustain your sobriety?
So these days, I still have someone that I use as a mentor. Actually, I probably have a few people that I use as mentors, but there's one person that knows the entirety of my life, and and has been with me like through the start of that journey, and like continues to know like everything about me, like in my day in and day out thought processes and all those things. That's one of the that's one of the things that I do. I also continue to voluntarily help people, I guess, with the same kinds of programs that have assisted me too.
And then one other one in the question and answer was, did you develop any other addictions?
I don't know if work necessarily counts as one now, but I would think sometimes sometimes that feels very I give an awful lot of my time to it, and I think some of those obsessive features I still, to some or another degree, still feel with motocross and like dirt bikes and working on engines and those kinds of things. But at least that's healthy, and like not all of my money is going towards it. But those are things that like occupy me as hobbies now.
Okay, we have a couple more questions that came in for you. So the second one is, so is it better to let someone, in your opinion, who is in your position you got out of, to let them want to get help, or to make them go without their consent? Do they have to want to get the help?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I can give black and white answers for anybody and everybody, because my story is different from other people's too. Like I've heard a number of different stories where it's just the right mixture of the right things for the right person at the right time, I guess. And like that, I know that sounds like convoluted to say, but I don't know. I don't know necessarily what creates that for people.
Okay, another one is, what would you suggest to people who don't have parents who are as supportive?
Oh, what would I suggest to them? I would suggest that they start somewhere. The behavioral health system in Arizona, and particularly in Phoenix, is wide reached right now, and like there's a lot of different things that are happening, and there's a lot of different like entry points in order to be able to get help that's needed. And I would say to find somebody that you can trust, even just a tiny little bit, and trust them, because that's a hard thing to do. I don't remember in this presentation or in one previously if I had mentioned it or not, but one of my questions was, every time that I would go to rehab for the counselors to walk in the rooms, is, do you know the difference between a Subway and a McDonald's bathroom stall? Because if you don't, we really don't have a reason to be talking. And I mean, like, that was the way that I thought then, thinking that like you had to have walked in my shoes in order to be able to know how to help me. But there were people along the way too that like had not been in those positions or didn't understand necessarily, that still offered, way more than I could have known at that time. But today, looking back on those things, like all of that stuff was applicable. I just didn't know.
Do you mentor other people who want to recover?
I do. I do.
Awesome. And then I'm getting some feedback. I'm going to mute you for a second, Chris, and then I'm going to unmute you. Okay. When adolescent with major depression needs to learn to become an adult, but not able to find a way to support himself independently, is there a good community resource or mentoring program that you can suggest? Not necessarily for somebody with a SMI designation, but somebody who might be getting treatment with private insurance. We're going to unmute, yeah.
You know what? I don't know. I don't know. On the ACT teams, like that, we've had younger people before, and like we've done the ADL training with them, or the living skills training with them. There, like, I know that there are housing programs that people can get into. I'm sure that there are some of those people on this call right now. But as far as general mental health, like I don't know. Oh, and with private insurance, I'm not aware of that. I'm sorry.
We might be able to find some resources that we can send out after that. So that's completely okay. Another question came in, and it's, in your journey, has anyone ever mentioned meditation or yoga, stuff like mental healing, and do any of the rehabs that you've been to or know of offered these practices?
Meditation's huge. Yeah, meditation is a big part too, and I think every place that I've been to has offered some form of that, some form of sitting quietly, and like getting comfortable with the breath, and like everything coming back to the breath, with various lengths of inhale, pause, and exhale. There are, as far as yoga is concerned, like I've never been to a program that provides yoga or mental healing. But I have done yoga independently with YouTube videos. I tried doing a class one time. I made it through one class and then could not go back to that.
Do you use a behavioral health center for support?
No, not presently. I don't. I do have a PCP that I use that's somewhat supportive. Yeah, and then outside of behavioral health, outside of that, I'm not receiving behavioral health services anywhere else.
Okay, and then another question that came in was, what advice or suggestions do you have for parents who have a young adult going through this type of addiction? How do you respond or handle their behaviors, or what can they do for support?
How do you respond to it? I feel like my parents tried everything. I know the stuff that didn't work was the stuff that allowed me to continue to play them. I know that that didn't work, and that's not an answer for everybody, because you know your kid better than anybody else does. You'll know what you're doing with your kid or not. For my parents, you know, when they stopped providing all of the support, and then you know the minor support stopped too. That's when things got hard enough for me, I suppose, that I had to really face reality, if there's no parental motel to go to anymore, if there's no place to get a meal anymore, and I'm just having to do these other things to be able to get there, you know, I can't really sustain this anymore. It's also important for family members to have their own supports as well. Being able to set up boundaries, I know, is a super hard thing to do, particularly with people that we love and care about, and when that stuff happens, you want to do everything you can for that person.
And it looks like there's actually something. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Even though it's after the fact, even though it's after the fact, it wasn't necessarily the right thing.
How are your parents now that you're sober? I know that parents are hesitant, scared, and very nervous, especially during trying times.
They're not anymore. They're not anymore. They were, I think at the beginning, if they were, they never showed that to me. I was away from them for 8 months with very little contact with them. And during that time, I got, you know, I developed and changed quite a bit. And then by the time I came out, I already had stuff that I was doing. I had a routine, I had places that I was going, people that I was going to go see, and they could see the evidence in my life from the things that I was doing that my life was different. But they're good. They're good.
Awesome. Do you allow a person to hit rock bottom prior to offering help? No. Offer help all the way through. I mean, I think the stages of change are for everybody, and I think I feel the IDDT model, whether or not there's mental health on board, also still is very applicable in our ways that we interact with people. So if you know if we need peer support there at the very entrance, or a supportive friend who's been there or whatever, at the very beginning, cool. But as things are happening, a counselor told me once. Good question. I'll get to that one too. A counselor told me once to put my hand up, right? And she put hers up next to mine, and she started pushing on mine, right? And my natural reaction was to push back, and she said, "Why are you pushing back?" I said, "Well, because you're pushing on mine." And she said, "Exactly, that's the point, because as we're trying to force somebody into doing something, they're not necessarily on the same page. And so if you start talking to me about this problem that I don't think that I have, that I think is your problem, I'm not going to want to listen to you, and I'm not going to want to do what it is that you say to do. But if we start talking, and people are using motivational interviewing with me, or people are talking to me, I don't know about the choices that I'm making, opposed to directive, this is you, because I can find ways to blame people too." I forgot what the original question was, but I feel it was important to say that no matter all the way through, people should be offered support. Awesome. And I'm not seeing anything else through the Q&A or chat. Actually, just kidding. Something just came in. Have you ever seen a mirror of you and a stranger before them becoming sober?
Have I ever seen a mirror of? I'm sorry. Can I have a? I don't.
Yeah, I think we'll need clarification on that one. Let's go to this other one first, and then we'll go back to that. If Catherine can clarify that question, let's go to Emily's question, which is, what if they don't want the help? What do you think could be done to support somebody who doesn't want help?
I think that for people who don't want help, that love is the best thing that we can provide for them. And that's, you know, that's also boundary love too, because like you can't let, you do whatever you want, but I mean, like I know that there's a difference between caring about somebody and providing like emotional support opposed to enabling, you know, and like there's a line there, and there's a very, very fine line, and sometimes you weave back and forth between it. Finding exactly like where that is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but I don't necessarily think you drop the person off and kick them to the curb and say like, yo, figure it out. You know, I would say more or less that like, you know, we're here, I'm here, you know, and when you're ready, I'm here, and then like at that point, like all resources available without any hiccups, like let's go, do this thing.
And I think what we're going to do now is we're going to unmute Catherine to ask her question. I see that she put a separate question in. Have you seen yourself in someone else, the addiction behaviors, and wondered how you got there? But let's hear from Catherine to see if we can get some more clarification on that.
Hello, how are you? My clarification is whatever your addiction was, you know, everybody has their addictions. Did you ever meet anybody out there, total stranger, that you saw in yourself, their behaviors, their addiction, the way they went to their addiction? I mean, did you see any of that? The behaviors of wanting something so bad? Or did you see any of that? That's what I mean by mirror. Did you in any of your journeys, did you see yourself as somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, I see that an awful lot, like in the work that I do and the work that I've done, like in the people that I work with outside of like, you know, my job. Like, yeah, I see it. I do see it a lot. Sometimes it's like it's a you know, without being coy or whatever, like it's a sobering moment to see that, like, you know, for the harder times, like, you know, particularly like with people that are standing on freeways, or people who are like you know, like doing their deal like out in the community. Like I don't know. There was a video that was posted on the Nextdoor app of somebody like smoking heroin in our neighborhood, you know, and like for whatever reason, like the people just wanted to like attack this dude or whatever, right? But like I'm thinking like, man, if this technology had been around like back then, like that's me there too, you know, and like how awful, and like how, you know, like I don't know. Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And then another question came in related to, is it a hard line to draw between love and enabling? And I think that that's related to that previous question for people that maybe not wanting that support, and to your response to love them.
Yeah, and I think everybody's going to have a different response to that too. You know, for some of the things that what happened with me were $5 gift cards. $5 gift cards in order to be able to get food, for my parents to say like, I love you, and I'm not going to give you enough for you to be able to trade for cash. You know, or being able to answer the phone and putting limits on the phone call, like, hey, like, you know, like if you're going to call me, like call me for what you're going to call me for, and like let's move on. The visits that would happen, like those would be like, they would be short-lived, and it would be just for whatever the goal was out of that visit, and then move on for whatever else it was that we were, you know, whatever else it was that they were doing too. For friends and like people that I mentor, it's the same kind of thing, like knowing when and where and how to give, like, you know, particularly like anybody who's on this line, like we're probably all like very much givers. and like knowing like where to draw that line at, and like I don't know. I think that it's I think it's the difference between a $5 gift card and $20 cash, though, like somewhere there.
I see one from Megan that just came in, so I'll read that one. Was there a delivery style from your support persons that worked best for you? How do you guide the team members you support in engaging with people with addiction?
That's going to go back to like what people respond to, and that's going to be different for everyone. For me, it's directive, and like for me, it's directive in saying like, here's this, that, and the other thing. But I also need explanations for stuff. I also need to know why. Like, why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind this, or whatever. And then how do you guide the team members you support in engaging with people with addiction? I have a lot of peer supports that are on my team. That work on my team, and I tell them to like do the same thing that we're doing here today. Tell your story. Talk to our people about like what's happening with you, and where like you've been doing the stuff that you've done. Like when you see parallels, like talk about those things, and like not necessarily do it in a I was like you one day or whatever. But I mean like just making like connections for our people. And I think that's helpful to our members. Like that's how I'm able to connect with the members that we have like on my team. And like that's what I do, is I'll talk to them about different things.
Yes, thank you. Okay, looks like we have one more. How does sharing your story help your recovery?
I don't really get to forget. For me, it's going back to like what life had looked like, because like it is night and day difference. Like waking up today opposed to waking up 8.5 years ago is night and day. And so like it's very easy to forget and very easy to separate, as like this is like I'm living somebody else's life, I guess. And so for me, like being able to like recap like everything that's happened along the way, and like continuing to have done this throughout the last years, it reminds me of where I came from, I suppose, and who I can be, I guess, and particularly with the work that I do too. Like it reminds me of like what of what my circumstances are different. Should I start making choices that I used to be okay with?
Well, thank you so much. This was a really impactful story of recovery and video, and it sounds like there's a lot that we're learning from you in this session today, and I appreciate you getting on and answering our questions as well. Your story is inspiring to many others, and not only that, but it's helpful for those who are working in the community as well. So thank you so much.